afternoon. Thank you for tuning in. We are back at the CCC Center at the Khomas Regional Council, where the daily COVID-19 briefings are taking place. This afternoon, the panelists are members from the higher education fraternity, and they will be discussing how these education programs will be affected by the COVID-19 and programs they have in place to deal with this issue. Thank you and stay tuned.
If I would like to get through the checkpoints that have been put up in the zone or at the borders of two zones, what documents do I require and what other circumstances can I use to travel?
Basically, when you are traveling within the or between zones, you need written authorization. And this written authorization must indicate whether your travel is necessary, either for medical purposes or for rendering essential services. And this written authorization should be issued by the Ministry of Health if it's for medical reason. By the Ministry of Trade by the Ministry of Trade if it's for commercial purposes when you are delivering essential service, commercial service, but which is categorized as an essential service.
Good afternoon, viewers and listeners across Namibia. Thank you very much for continuously joining us here at the COVID-19 Communication Center as we continuously give you updates around COVID-19 in the country. This afternoon, we are joined by panelists from the higher education fraternity to come and launch the high-level inter-universities research task force on COVID-19 and engage us on e-learning at the institutions of higher learning. To do that, I am joined by the Honorable Dr. Ita Kanji-Murangi, who is the Honorable Minister in the Ministry of Higher Education, Technology and Innovation, to come launch, as well as panelists from the University of Namibia, Prof. Kenneth Matengo, who is the Vice Chancellor, and Dr. Paulus Shetekelau, who is a Director of ICT Services at the International University of Management. But before we do that, as you know, this morning we discussed a little bit about movement restrictions as well as zoning and immigration matters. We therefore now have Honorable Pea Mushelenga, who is the Minister of ICT, who did an inspection of our checkpoints at the different roadblocks set up by the Safety and Security Ministry to ensure that that is regulated, to briefly give us an update about his observations at those checkpoints. Honorable Dr. Mushelenga.
Thank you very much, Honorable Tefelos, and good afternoon, viewers and listeners. I went to check the roadblocks, entry points into Khomas region, from the side of Shadonjupa region, and from Erongo regions. And I would like to call upon Namibians to observe the measures that have been put in place. First, there are vehicle owners who are overloading passengers, resulting in these passengers being offloaded at the roadblocks. Again, we would like to call upon to those that are transporting passengers to abide by the regulations that have been put in place, not to exceed the number of maximum permissible passengers so that you don't leave your passengers stranded at the roadblocks. Secondly, only people with valid permits will be allowed to pass through these roadblocks. We realize that people are trying to use all sorts of excuses. It's only when you have an emergency that you will be allowed to go through. Not like in instances where I'm told you have 5 passengers saying we are going to take these deliveries to the farm, it does not need 5 passengers to go and take deliveries to the farm. So you will not be allowed to pass through. And another message has been repeatedly said. The Executive Director of the Ministry of Basic Education has spoken about it. I previously spoke about it. Yet, that roadblock is overwhelmed by a number of teachers who are saying they are going back to work. We have already announced that teachers will resume work on the 20th, but they will start working from their homes. Meaning, if you had traveled out from your duty station, you should start working from wherever you are, receiving instructions from your principal. It's only after the lockdown that they will be allowed to travel from wherever they are to go to their duty stations. And we would like everyone to cooperate with the measures that have been put in place so that we try really to fight the COVID-19 pandemic. And again, we want to repeat with regard to social gatherings that people should abide by the limited numbers that have been put there in order to ensure that we do not have people overcrowding at one place. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister, for that update. I think the message is very clear. Let us remain in our homes and not travel unnecessarily to places that would not be necessary for us to travel to. As we now move into today's topic around higher education, I would like to call upon Honorable Dr. Ita Kanji Murangi to come and launch the high-level inter-universities research task force on COVID-19. Honorable Murangi.
Thank you, Honorable Theophilus, Deputy Minister. The deadly coronavirus originated in Wuhan city in China in late December last year. The pace at which this virus was spreading was quite unprecedented, and it still is. The resultant fatalities were mounting nearly every minute. Our vulnerability as mortal beings was brought to the fore. This actually shook humanity, and no nation was ready for this. I thank God for having preserved our nation, and I pray that He continues to shower His grace on our nation so that none of our citizens actually will have to succumb to this virus. I also thank His Excellency, our President, for having called a day of prayer for us as a nation to humble ourselves before the Lord. Now, coronavirus brought numerous disruptions to human life. It brought disruptions to the way we do businesses, the way we run our daily lives, the way we educate, the way we provide our health services, and indeed all other important services to our citizens. But this comes with grave consequences that are immediate, intermediary, as well as long-term. So indeed, nations have to prepare for now as well as the future. We are now compelled to adopt to a new global social order that is characterized by lockdowns and quarantines. And this, as citizens of the world, particularly citizens of Namibia, we must embrace and follow to the letter, because it's only by so doing that we can make sure that we properly contain, detect, test, and treat the coronavirus as well as curb it. Disobeying any of the rules and regulations that are set in place will only be to our peril. His Excellency's decisive leadership and resolute guidance in this regard is worth noting. The concerted efforts of the entire cabinet on fighting coronavirus under the coordination and leadership of the Prime Minister, assisted by the Deputy Prime Minister, is also worth mentioning. Ministers of Health, our host ministry this afternoon, and other front runners, our doctors, our nurses, our women and men in uniform, all deserve commendation as they actually sacrifice for our welfare and safety. Now, in higher education, the coronavirus situation has actually meant that we look closely at two important areas. The first one is that of constituting local experts into a group that can closely follow the global trends of this virus in order to try and perfect and improve our own strategies or coping strategies. In other words, the nation needed an inter-institutions, multidisciplinary group of experts to position itself within the national equation of COVID-19 front runners and fight the virus through scientific explorations, to identify critical areas that need immediate interrogation and help unravel the COVID-19 enigma. But also look closely at some key sectors as far as the impact that COVID-19 may actually bring to bear on those sectors. We constituted a 12-member team of experts shortly after the first few cases were announced. And this team is led by Professor Kenneth Matengu, the UNAM Vice Chancellor, and chaired by Professor Kavishe. They work closely with the Ministry of Health because their work is basically to augment the work of that ministry. The second thing that the coronavirus compelled us to do as a ministry responsible for higher education is that when schools, universities, TVET centers were closed because that was necessary or necessitated by the first lockdown, we welcomed the move, but as a ministry we knew that it is a challenge because of the uncertainty of when normalcy will return. A challenge also because of the indefinite stoppage of organized and guided teaching and learning. Obviously, that did not sit well with us in the ministry, but of course, we knew there was very little room to maneuver. In the ministry, we see COVID-19 as a serious disruption to our national education system, to our national development plan, as well as Harambee Prosperity Plan's targets. It is a real threat to the attainment of the planned educational activities and programs. It is basically an unwelcomed, costly setback to the teaching and learning process, as well as to the entire academic year. However, in the face of these challenges, we also knew as a ministry that the government of the Republic of Namibia had actually invested immensely in the policy of taking education or higher education to the rural masses. And that policy meant that the delivery mode needed to be diversified. We also know that that policy, it actually gave birth to a number of things. It gave birth to NAST and UNAM's regional centers, as well as campuses. It gave birth to robust distance education architecture at both public institutions, and we have seen people graduate under this mode. The first week of the lockdown meant a marathon of meetings between the ministry, higher education institutions, leadership, and indeed many others, particularly our telecommunication partners. We needed to do this so that we could establish the extent of the impact of COVID-19 on higher education and training. We also conducted a survey that analyzed the IT infrastructure across our institutions. We also needed to come together to brainstorm and assess the possible immediate interventions and remedies. All these were done to help inform the position of government on what is to be done going forward. One of the things that was evident through the survey and the assessment is that most of our higher education institutions have migrated their academic programs online already. Also, most of these institutions have programs that are being taught on full-time basis, part-time basis, as well as the distance mode. There are about 68,000 students in all 16 higher education institutions in Namibia. Out of this number, close to 20 or to 25 students have challenges related to access, connectivity, possession or ownership of relevant electronic gadgets, and indeed, some of those, particularly within this 20 to 25% brackets, are vulnerable and needy students from impoverished backgrounds. However, upon noticing the number of 25%, the ministry decided to go ahead and engage further our telecommunication partners, NASFAF, higher education institutions themselves, and our development partners to establish how best the 25% of these students could actually be assisted. It is also important to make mention of the fact that we have agreed with the different higher education institutions that once the situation returns to normal, different institutions will have to allow time for remedial teaching, and that is basically to try and compensate for lost time. But we are also saying as a ministry, where the infrastructure exists, where students have the necessary electronic equipment available to them, teaching and learning should continue. As a minister responsible for the sector, I urge the higher education institutions with the right online infrastructure, with the quality assured content online, and which have established access, connectivity, and possession of the necessary electronic equipment and devices with the bulk of their students to proceed with ensuring that teaching and learning happens during this time. The current efforts by the ministry, NASFAF, higher education institutions, local and foreign partners in higher education, as well as the telecommunication companies, will be accelerated to bring the 25% who are affected negatively into the fold of being active e-learners. Even in this most unusual circumstance, the government of the Republic of Namibia is committed to quality education for all. And I'm saying this knowing that with the migration of programs to online, our National Qualifications Authority is and has been very much involved. They say practice makes perfect. It is time we embrace and perfect the necessary system of teaching using modern technologies. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister, for launching that high-level inter-university task force on COVID-19. Would like to then discuss the issues of modalities. Perhaps I would ask Prof. Matengu to give us generally what these modalities will be for this task force.
Yes. Thank you very much, Honorable Deputy Minister. I observe all the protocols. I maybe just want to highlight what this task force will be doing. Its main objective is it's a research coordination task force meant to assist the Ministry of Health and the whole government in its response to COVID-19 pandemic using information and data derived from research. As a higher education sector responsible for research, technology and innovation, the involvement of the task force would be multi-pronged with a well-focused and targeted empirical research geared towards innovative solutions to mitigate against the adverse effects of COVID-19. We have 6 thematic areas that they will cover. Number 1 is COVID-19 diagnostics. This group will consider ways in which rapid testing and diagnostics for early detection and containment can be achieved, including mass screening of COVID-19. Furthermore, they will carry out research targeting relevant aspects of COVID-19 diagnostics. This thematic area has 2 teams. One will be looking into testing and screening, and the other will be looking at research on COVID-19 diagnostics, basically the science behind it. Thematic area number 2 would be epidemiology and forecasting. This will examine how data coding can be used to improve and fast-track COVID-19 tracing and better case management. The use of technology or smartphones to track primary cases and assist with tracking suspected cases, unintended exposure should be incorporated. This team will basically be looking at see how we can use cell phones to be able to alert people if we have data that enables us to cluster. So when you move into an area, your phone should be able to tell you are entering into a zone where there's intensity of cases and so on. Number 3 is behavior change communication. As we know, knowing something doesn't always mean a change of behavior. So this team will analyze and recommend how communication information on the pandemic can be used so as to lead to behavior change while considering cultural norms, values, and identity. It was observed that someone with expertise in medical anthropology and behavior change should be in this team, and we have those as part of the team that will work on behavior change communication. The 4th is economic impact of COVID-19 on Namibia. This group will generate evidence on which sectors of the economy will be most severely hit by the pandemic and make actionable recommendations to the government and the private sector. This particular thematic group will consider sectors such as tourism, long-distance transport, construction, manufacturing, non-food wholesalers, self-employed businesses, and the informal sector. Number 5 is product development. We know as a country that Namibia is endowed with natural products. So the team will be looking at plant-based natural products based on scientific research and indigenous knowledge that could be developed to improve people's immune systems and provide a roadmap for their development. It was agreed to study people, especially whose immune system is compromised and those whose immune system has been compromised by malnutrition. Under this group, we have 2 teams, one that is looking at immune systems compromised by HIV/AIDS and immune systems compromised by malnutrition. The other research thematic areas, which is number 6, is relates to the relationship between A, B, and O blood groups. As you know, there has been some data that has been generated now by other scientists elsewhere, which says basically those that are in who have A blood group are more vulnerable. So to determine the relationship between COVID-19 susceptibility or resistance and the A-B-O blood groups or other indicators within the Namibian context and identify possible early warning indicators. Another sub-theme here is water and sanitation facilities. The group will be looking at how to improve water and sanitary facilities in the country and accessories. And they are looking into whether we can produce local materials for various communities to improve sanitation and access to clean and potable water. And the last one is innovative solutions addressing COVID-19. The research will focus on innovative solutions to address challenges associated with COVID-19 in general. And the following members will form this team. Professor Kavishe will be the chair, and he will work with Professor Chimamrombe, Dr. Nyambe, Prof. Peters, Mr. Abel, Dr. Shungula, Prof. Mombengengwi, Dr. Hakuria, Dr. Nepolo, Dr. Pesent, Dr. Matros Goreses, and Prof. Timothy Rennie. These staff members are coming from the University of Namibia and NAST, and also some private practitioners. They have co-opted in other members such as Prof. Christian Hunter, Dr. Kibule, and Dr. Samuel John. So these will be the team that will be looking into this research, and we expect that they will be producing results on what they are doing to assist the government. Having said this, I'd like to invite the Minister to formally launch the group.
Yes, Honorable Minister.
Well, it is now a reality that formally the group is launched today, although the work actually commenced some weeks back.
Thank you very much. Dr. Shetekalao, before we allow the legal media practitioners in the House to ask us any questions around, of course, the task force, but more importantly around e-learning, as the Director of ICT at IUM, of course, there's some modalities or avenues being put in place to ensure that every student in this particular time gets the value of education they're supposed to get. From your perspective, what might be the challenges associated with ensuring that e-learning becomes a viable option for all university students at this time, but what might be the opportunities as well at this moment?
Thank you, Deputy Minister. With all protocols observed, the e-learning platforms that the higher educational institutions has launched recently, it's an opportunity for us to make sure that students remain in contact with their lecturers to get the education they needed during FaceTime classes. On the other hand, there are many challenges that we face as a country, not just higher educational institutions, but also across the country. With the first thing that we need to look at here as a challenge is network coverage, internet connection or access to internet by students and lecturers together, and also the availability and access to electronic devices means that they can be able to use to connect to internet and then be able to connect to the e-learning platform that the universities are providing. Higher educational institutions, I'm aware of UNAM, NAST, and us as a university, we have launched our e-learning before COVID came. It was mainly set up for e-learning and distance students so that they can be able to upload their assignments and be able to share notes with their lecturers and do possible assessments that they can do. So all these now, due to COVID situation in the country, all the courses have been moved to cater for all students wherever they are so that there is no disturbance in their academic progress within the year. So the challenges, which is mainly connected to network coverage, the devices, are faced with students that mainly live in areas where there is no network coverage, in areas or students that could not afford to purchase these devices. And we know this situation, most of the electronic selling shops are closed, and they could not get access. Perhaps for those that have means to buy these solutions, they could not get access to them. On the other hand, also the platforms that are provided also require much in certain areas. If you are doing a live class, much traffic, and the internet connection could not match with the required services that students may need. So these are the challenges. An opportunity for us as a country is that we now have these challenges, and we need now to curb these challenges, introducing what is already existing or looking to what is already existing. And we can therefore work with our ISPs, mainly the telecommunication companies, to provide the means that students could be able to access these electronic e-platforms that the universities are providing at this moment.
Thank you, Doctor. Just one last one. There is some calls by certain members of the public and even student organizations such as NANSO that students should boycott e-learning platforms in this particular time. What can you say around that?
With that regard, in boycotting, I wouldn't agree with that because we are in a situation where we need to find means on how to move forward. Even though there is a situation of majorities maybe, or a certain number of students that are affected, here is my appeal to the government to come forth and assist students that are not able to get this online platform or access to online platform that the universities are providing. So as I heard from the minister, there are already measures to take care of these individuals, roughly as she indicated, 25%. It could be more also, because on our side as institutions, we are also doing a survey of the number of students we have and those that are able to get the access to our online platforms. So we are busy capturing data to know who is capable of getting the current access to our e-learning platforms and who are not able, and we communicate with them to find out whether they are able or they have means to do so. And in many cases, we got the result that they have no other means to get access to e-learning platform that the institutions are using.
So therefore, the repercussions of actually boycotting are much more worse than getting on board with the efforts being made to allow every student to be able to access the education that they need at this moment.
It's a situation where you need to think actively.
Yes.
And if you remain now to say, let's just sit home and wait for the COVID, we don't know when it's ending.
Exactly.
So it may affect many, so that you may have 2 or 3 years. What will you do? Sit home and just wait for COVID to... It means that we have our brains to use, and we can use them to think properly and look for other means that could assist the population that is affected.
Therefore, everybody needs to come on board and pull their weight to make this work.
And in case of this now, we need a coordinated effort, as the ministry has already done, to include, especially the ministry, your Ministry of ICT is vital in this role to play with our telecommunication companies, because in this situation, we more rely on internet service provision to students.
Definitely. Thank you very much, Doctor. I now give over to any media practitioners who might have questions. Yes, ma'am, one. And so over there, two. Yes, ma'am.
Jemima Beatrice, Namibia Media Holdings, Namibian Sun newspaper. Honorable Pair, you are the spokesperson of this government. What is the government's response to the 90,000 job losses that are being predicted as a result of the coronavirus outbreak? And can you also, we would also like, well, there are concerns throughout the country on the government's decision to give people a 750 grant, and yet at the same time the government is complaining that it does not have money for mass testing. Would it not have made sense to use this money instead for mass testing to allow us to have a scientific basis for us to work on a peak, which would allow us to gradually revive our economy? And then can you please comment on Dr. Shangula, the health minister's, well, he called it a mistake. He told the media roughly 2 months ago that the Romanian couple recovered. He was given plenty opportunities to rectify this mistake, but he only, when we confronted him yesterday, that was the only time he decided to come clean. And this is casting a very big shadow over all the things that we have been told. And you should understand, as the Minister of Information, that there's this big issue about fake news, and the journalists are made out as the biggest culprits, and yet we can see for ourselves that it is in fact government officials. Thank you very much.
Any questions around higher education? Yes, sir? I'll give you an opportunity after that.
Good afternoon, Chiri, freelance journalist. I have about 3 questions. The first one goes to Dr. Kanji Morangi, especially in terms, it's to do with affordability. You spoke of involving NASFAF in the rollout, and I just wanted to know whether government has readily available resources for this, because NASFAF was already struggling in terms of our resources. And then also to you, a second part of that question is that in terms of sustainability of these tertiary institutions like NAST and UNAM were already crying over severe budget cuts. If I get it right, last year the NAST Council were saying their budget was almost cut by a quarter. So in terms of affordability and sustainability of this online project, how sustainable is it? Then to Professor Matengu and the representative from IUM, universities everywhere in the world are now taking the lead in research. I think coming up with researches that can create things like sanitizers and also masks and whatnot. Why has it taken so long for our institutions here, both UNAM, IUM, and us to take the lead into this? Okay, then, yeah, I think that should be all.
Thank you. I now give over to Honorable Peya to respond to the questions directed to him.
Thank you very much. To start with your last question, the Minister of Health and Social Services has rectified the mistake that he has made, and I hope we should learn to appreciate that when one rectifies a mistake, he has rectified a mistake. I do not know why should we make it a hulaba law that he has been repeatedly making this mistake. If eventually he has corrected that mistake, you media practitioners also deliberately do mistakes, but no one makes a hulaba law about it. The second question that you have asked about the 750, you must know that government is trying to strike a balance between the health and the economy. Now, testing, as you are told, is expensive, but you test people when there's a case definition. You don't just test people for the sake of testing, because otherwise you are also spending money in testing where some people have not been exposed at all to situations whereby there are people that have been affected by corona. Now, the 750 is to try to keep the economy running so that you do not leave people in destitution. Now, the question of people losing jobs, you have heard the Minister of Labor pleading with employers not to lay off workers, and government is sitting almost every week not almost, government is sitting every week, a ministerial committee on economy is sitting every week in order to try to devise measures in order to address the issues that including job losses. I thank you.
Yes, Honorable Minister.
Thank you, Moderator. I think with regards to the issue of sustainability, the reality is this, that COVID-19 actually came on board in the midst of the economic meltdown of, globally. And in Namibia, all institutions, all organizations of government have to do more with less. With regards to the sustainability of the e-learning at our public institutions, I think we are saying it is important that the effective existing infrastructure that is there to support e-learning has to be fully utilized. Where improvements are needed, we need to look at that, quantify those, and see how best we can all together, those who are involved within the sector of higher education, including our partners, how best we can address those. So really we cannot pack, as it were, e-learning in order for the economy to improve somehow. What can be salvaged with the current infrastructure needs to be salvaged. Thank you.
Thank you. Prof, there's also a question to you.
Thank you. Maybe I say 3 points. One is that this is a time when it is required of everybody to exercise what I would call social, political, and economic hygiene. It is important that we are not in the business of demanding government must do that, must do that. It is time for all of us to really think about what can we do as citizens? What is our role that we can play to contribute better to salvage this situation? So as a university, I don't think we are taking long to respond. What we have done is all our students, all 27,000 students have 4Gs loaded with 10 gigabytes data. So they should be able to access where there is network. Now, what we would require from them is that they would try and see if they can get in areas where they have access. If someone is in some village somewhere, maybe it just needs a $50 or a $70 to get in an area where there's network, download the information they need, they go back and work remotely, and then come back and upload their assignments in an area. So it requires that they too play a role. UNAM cannot go and put now towers in areas where there's no towers, or improve the 3G the network from 2G to 4G. So everybody must play their part. This is really what we are saying. Yes, the budget of the university has been cut, that is true, but we have to mobilize our efforts to attract more resources from elsewhere. On the question of why are we taking so long, I don't understand what we have taken long on. What we have done as a university, we have worked and facilitated for training of diagnostics for NIP already 3 weeks ago. We have availed our diagnostic lab to contribute to this effort. In terms of the production of the sanitizers, we have that production already. We are at a point of 1,500 bottles a day. We hope to increase that next week to 5,000 a day. So we are doing everything that we can to contribute. But when we are dealing with human lives, it is important that we are not rushing things, because this is the health of people. So everything that we do, we must quality assure and make sure that is up to standard to ensure nobody is endangered with whatever we are producing. So you may think that takes long, but quality assurance is important. The margin of error has to be raised to 99.9%, because this is about lives of people.
Thank you. Doctor, would you like to add anything?
I would just perhaps add on the mass testing issues that many of people are asking. would be necessary in cases where you have locations that no one, or in areas where one could not travel and cause havoc, especially in villages where you have students that are composed. I'm speaking of learners now in school. They could perhaps be tested and see whether there are people, and they could now, on this base, continue with their routine activities they have been doing in terms of now continuing what they've been doing since or before the COVID situation came in the country. And it could assist also those local marketers that are selling their products in the street, so that they know they don't have any case that may arise, because they have been monitored in case of the roadblocks that the law enforcement agencies has been putting up in the roads, and this could provide a safe environment for those people in those areas. So that's just what I would suggest. Perhaps we could listen to those people that are in those areas and perhaps render the required services.
Thank you, Doctor. Any more questions? Yes, sir. Oh, there's one right here. Yes, ma'am.
Good afternoon. Welcome to everybody who's present here, and I stand on the protocol already observed. My name is Shianua Kahiha. I'm a media officer from the Ministry of Information. We have a few questions that have come through, but I would like to start with saying thank you. We applaud the efforts that have been made by the ministry and all stakeholders involved. One of the questions speaks to the payments. In the discussions that you have had as a ministry and all the educational institutions, have there been any consideration to the relaxation of payment methods? Because as we stand, most institutions have due dates during the years on when certain amounts or percentages need to be paid. Has that been considered, the relaxation thereof? And also there are some students who highlighted that they are interested in deregistering and just coming back the next academic year when all has settled down and redoing these subjects or re-registering for these subjects. But that would be on the basis of them being reimbursed, and that amount of money that they're reimbursed would allow them to come and re-register for the academic year next year. The other question speaks to the parking of modules, where they understand that the money is needed by the institutions, especially with the measures that the institutions are putting in place. These measures cost money. They're willing to park their modules, but still pay the institutions for the year and come back the next academic year, but not then they wouldn't be paying anything. In that way, they would be helping the institutions by still, paying their amounts for that year, but coming back and sit the normal method of, education. So these are basically the questions. Has consideration been made within the discussions that the ministry and the institutions have been having so far? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Those are questions from our viewers. Yes, Honorable.
Thank you. I think what is coming through here, it's something that one can actually characterize by saying we have a challenge as a country, as a sector, a challenge that requires concerted efforts of all involved in order to arrive at reasonable, amenable solutions to all. Yes, I hear what the students are saying in terms of whether they should be allowed to pack courses or not in order for them to come the next year. But I think that is a choice that one has to make, one. Number two, it's important also for those who are considering that to actually engage their institutions. For instance, if one is in fourth year, whereby one is almost at the tail end of their journey, their academic journey, it will be prudent on such a student to actually first, before one considers or chooses to re-register, to engage the institution. Because it might be that it's one or two modules of the academic year that will be affected. It's unfortunate that no one knows the definite time that normalcy will come back to these institutions. But we don't really want to encourage people to jump ship too early, too soon, because it might be a short while and in no time things fall back to normal. Let's engage and hear the side of the institutions with regards to the amount of work that one still has to cover. Maybe the first years, maybe the second years, but for those who are senior students, I would really urge them to engage their institutions. Have we discussed the issue of relaxing the fees? I think normally issues of this nature, when they do arise, like at the beginning of each academic year, the ministry and institutions with regards to registration fee, I'm saying, issues of this nature always require the institutions and the ministry to engage and actually have a position. Negotiations are ongoing. We are monitoring the situation, and indeed, in these negotiations, a position will be taken after knowing the extent to which the impact is really on the broader sector of higher education. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything you would like to add?
I think I would like people to listen very carefully. This is not the time to withdraw. This country needs people to be injected in the workforce next year. We need those doctors, we need those dentists, those pharmacists, the accountants, and so on. So if you decide to withdraw, that you are going to park your studies, who is going to take care of the economy? We need people to be employed next year. These people must graduate. Why would they want to withdraw? We have made every effort to make sure that people have access to education. As I was saying, even if it means if you don't have access now to a laptop, we have said before, we are going to make plans as an institution as soon as this pandemic is over, or as soon as the lockdown is over, we would be able to organize intensive courses for those that have not managed to log on online to make sure they catch up. So really, it is not a good idea to withdraw. Of course, that's a choice you exercise. But if you exercise that choice, you must remember that we are an institution that is governed by policies and laws. There are times in which if you deregister, you can be compensated. After a certain time, there is no compensation. That is by policy. Mm-hmm. So I strongly discourage the idea of parking. People must take their education seriously. Of course, online learning means you take charge of the studies, and that's maybe the pressure people feel. But in any case, that's the future of 4th and 5th industrial revolution. In 30 years, you may not have teachers in front of you. What are you going to do?
Thank you, Prof. All right, maybe I could just, yes, sir?
Thank you
One
so
last
much.
question.
Thank you so much. My name is Pancho Mulongeni, and I'm representing the Namibian newspaper. My question relates to the fact that we know the majority of our learners and students don't have access to the necessary equipment, whether it's laptops or tablets. Now, the cheapest tablet, if you look online, costs about 700, 800 Namibian dollars. So what actually stops the government from ordering masses of these tablets, especially since not everyone who applied for the 750 actually received it? There were quite a large chunk that was rejected. So couldn't some of that money be used to buy these tablets and distribute to the students? Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have one more question? So we just take them together. Yes, sir.
Good afternoon, Ministers, Professor Matengo and the representative from IUM. I see Africa is coming to the table, providing solutions to these challenges its own solutions to these challenges that we're having, provided by the COVID-19. The Africa Development Bank has made available, has put together what it calls a COVID-19 crisis response package, providing for about $10 billion US. Are we accessing that funds to support the research? And then also another question would be around This research that we are going to do, this high-level panel, will it also inform a crisis, a post-COVID crisis response plan in the event of a similar pandemic striking again? Because there are reports that maybe COVID-19 would be an annual occurrence, almost like the flu. Thank you very much.
Thank you. One last one.
Thank you. My name is Kevin. I am a presenter on Eagle FM. Thank you so much for the opportunity. I don't know how behind I am with information, but there was some whisperings and talk about UNAM venturing into manufacturing of sanitizer. Vice Chancellor Matengo, if you can take us into that, is there any truth to that? And if there's any truth to it, what are the production levels? Is this being mainstreamed? Where are we accessing our alcohol? And my question to the Honorable Minister of Higher Education, is there coordination between your ministry and that of basic education when it comes to maybe replication or taking some notes in how higher education is leveraging on e-learning so that our students can proceed? Because this is quite new for our public schools downstream. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you very much. The first question about the number of students who are affected by lack of the necessary equipment for e-learning. I think, like I said earlier, there are altogether 68,000 students in all our higher education institutions across the country. And only 20 to 25% of those have problems when it comes to access, connectivity, and ownership of the necessary gadgets to become e-learners. So basically, the bulk of the students within the higher education sector are well covered. Yes, the institutions themselves have challenges with bandwidth. Also, to some extent, in some of the institutions, very few, the challenge of capacity. But as I said, the ministry, our public and private higher education institutions, our partners, we are working together to ensure that we address this need. As I speak, consultations are at an advanced stage to see how best the 25% negatively affected students could be assisted. You spoke about NSFAF. NSFAF does fund 100% of students' tuition fees, those who are funded by NSFAF. We also know that there are students who are privately funded. Within the NSFAF components of fees, there is what we call tuition fee, which I said is 100% paid, covered by NSFAF. But also there is an amount called non-tuition fee. It is for the students themselves, those who are funded by NSFAF, to see to it that when this money comes, the non-tuition fee part comes, it is directed to a worthy cause. And what is that worthy cause in these challenging times? Acquisition of the necessary electronic gadgets that will ensure that they will continue to access education online.
Thank you, Doctor. Perhaps we could also get into final words as we respond to the questions.
Thank you. If we stick to the facts, as the Minister indicated, it's about 20 to 25%. So the survey that we are running at the moment, which I think for UNAM will conclude today, is to establish who exactly these students are, where they are, what do they lack. Once we know that, we would be able to assist where we can. But like we are saying, this is a challenge that everybody else must respond. If there is a member of the public who has 2 laptops, this is the time to give one. Donate it to the people who would need it. We have been engaged with different entities, companies, through their corporate social responsibility. We have asked from them, we're just waiting for responses to see what they can support. But our estimate is that we need between 7,000 to 12,000 students to be assisted with laptops. But even if they would be assisted with laptops, if they are in geographical areas where there is no network, it still means parents must come in to support their children with transport money to get into a geographical area which has network. They cannot expect the institutions to also give money for students to travel. So this is what we mean by everybody else getting on board to play their part. Regarding the question about the rumor of UNAM producing sanitizer, it's not a rumor anymore. I can confirm that it is a fact. Section 3 of the University Act establishes the university as a juristic person, able to trade, to sell, to take bonds, and so on. That is by legislation. And we are not the only university in the world to do this. We have established a 100% owned commercial entity that does that on behalf of the university. What we do is to do research, build the prototypes, incubate, quality assure, and then we transfer to the commercial entity to do that business. University of Stellenbosch or University of Pretoria have similar companies that are doing different kinds of things. In fact, the University of Toronto's company is even listed on stock exchange. This is the way to go for institutions to be able to raise money to support its aims and objectives. Regarding the making efforts to tap on funds that may have been available by the African Development Bank or any other body, we are working very hard on that. Our grants office has teams that are putting together those applications. Together with our partners. For example, with University of Porto in Portugal, we have put together a proposal for increasing our PCR and diagnostic capabilities. So there are many, many efforts that we are making to ensure that we are contributing even post COVID-19. Our thinking is a whole system preparedness, and that's why you have those thematic areas, so that even after this pandemic, we are able to use the lessons that we gain now to prepare better for the future.
Thank you, Prof.
I don't know whether I have left any other question.
I think it's clear. Yeah. Yes, Doctor.
Thank you. In terms of developing our own infrastructures, or so to say, continuing with the e-learning platforms that the institution is currently offering. IUM is a private institution, and we mainly focus on research, education, and also aspect of business in terms of collaborating with other stakeholders. In terms of ICT as a solution to this pandemic and in future, I would just urge most of solutions that are available in this world are foreign made. We don't have systems currently in the country that we can say we have developed. We have open sources available that can be taken, that's free, redeveloped, and then you have something that you develop for your own country. And I'm talking of now system softwares that could help us now to manage infrastructures, application softwares that could be used to aid with services delivery to end users. And this is something that we need to set up as a country to make sure that we have development capacities when it comes to ICT. This is now have to do with so that in future we don't become digitally enslaved by corporate or outside world corporates in the industry of ICT. So it's something that we need to take care of in terms of licensing, and it easily that the cloud services are available, but they are readily outside the country. MTC have done a great job by setting up their own cloud services in the country, and I think it's time now to find out what could be the measures put in place to make sure that we use our own infrastructures when it comes to the information communication technology. And this has to go with the devices also. To create an innovation center where young people, we have a lot of smart people in the country with innovative mind, and they could come up with solutions that could aid us also in this current situation and in the future. Now, post-COVID, with the continuation of online education and other services that could be offered to end users everywhere in the country.
Thank you very much, Doctor. Perhaps concluding remarks as we round up this session.
Excuse me?
Just some concluding remarks as we round up the session.
My concluding remarks would be mostly as higher educational institution, IUM. We are ready in terms of service provisions to our students wherever they are, and we are collaborating with our stakeholders, especially the Ministry of Education, our partners in education, to formulate a system or a package that could be used by all students wherever they are. And this includes also our telecommunication companies, and in line with that is the Ministry of ICT that we are looking forward to.
Thank you very much, Doctor. Honorable Kanji.
Yes, there was a question that I would like to respond to, and this is the question that dealt with whether we collaborate with the Ministry of Basic Education on issues pertaining to e-learning. I think we all know that education is a continuum, and therefore, if there are challenges at the lower part, obviously, higher education will not be well grounded. So indeed, there is continuous engagement, discussions, even now, dealing with the aspects of e-learning, dealing with the possibility even come next year, should COVID be a protracted challenge, will we be able to have first years or no? Those are the things that we are already engaging on, including actually how best they can be capacitated so that if indeed they have the right infrastructure, they will be able to roll out the e-learning at that level. With regard to the final words, I would like to say that the ministry is here to put out policies. The ministry is also here to ensure that it facilitates partnerships, it facilitates engagements that lead to strong partnerships between and amongst institutions and organizations to ensure that at the end of the day, quality higher education is actually achieved at our institutions. But the actual action has to be done by the institutions. For example, forging partnerships with telecommunication companies to ensure that some of the gadgets that we are talking about that students are lacking, this could be ironed out with MOUs with some of these companies. And I believe since the discussions have started, we'll be in a better position to ensure that some of those things are taken care of. I would also like to urge students out there and parents out there to ensure that we encourage our students, our youth, our learners who can access e-learning to actually do so jealously. It's important for them to guard the journey of their education. And for now, we are not saying e-learning is the only option or the only mode. There are variations within e-learning. Please, whatever you can access, access it and make sure that you don't fall by the wayside. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, bro.
Thank you. Let me conclude maybe by just sharing information. I picked up there was a question somewhere where people are saying if they are in a remote area, they would like to access our library. How do they do that? As long as you have access to internet, it's not a problem. We have a subscription over 3 million e-books and more than 20,000 journal articles which are available. You can access them anyway. If you're having some difficulties to access on the website of the library, there are some contacts there that you can communicate to. You write to them and they will download that particular article or e-books and send it to you. What is required here is just a change of mindset. Also for the academics, not to ask students to cite books that was published in 1968, because those would not be available. They need to be using latest knowledge, using journal articles to be able to respond effectively. Then there was also concerns about some practicals, how would these be done? There are practicals that really require physical presence, but there are other practicals that can be done using simulation. And as a university, we have a system called Power Lab, and I think mostly our veterinary medicine, they are using that platform where they can simulate surgery and other things using that system. So we have those platforms. They just require a lot more effort and commitment from the students to be able to do those simulations. But as I said, everything else that can't be done now, we will make time for it to be done when time allows for that face-to-face. Then lastly is just to appeal. This is not the time to give up, as Honorable Minister said. This is a time to say, this country needs me. What am I going to do to contribute to the human resources that are needed in this country? And just we need to switch our mind and make us think more about how we are going to assist this country to develop and achieve its development objectives. And I believe we can do this. We just need to think positively rather than put too much negative energy into the system.
Thank you very much, Prof, for those concluding remarks. Thank you very much to my panel for making the time to come launch your task force as well as engage us around e-learning. And also that your stakeholders, both at institutional level, governmental level, as well as student organizations are working together to ensure that we're able to make this work during these very difficult times. Thank you very much for your time. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that's all the time we had today as we gave our brief update on COVID-19 in the country, but more specifically around the higher education sector. Join us again tomorrow as we discuss and give you an update on the operations of the Ministry of Health and Social Services call center that receives all your queries and questions COVID-19 related. That is the number 0800 100 100, as well as the surveillance team that is trying to ensure that COVID-19 does not spread further. So that is all the time we had today. Continue sending your questions and queries to our email address, that is covid.nam@mict.gov.na, and we'll continue to engage our panelists with that. Thank you very much for taking time out, and see you tomorrow.
Thank you very much. The first question about the number of students who are affected by lack of the necessary equipment for e-learning. I think, like I said earlier, there are altogether 68,000 students in all our higher education institutions across the country. And only 20 to 25% of those have problems when it comes to access, connectivity, and ownership of the necessary gadgets to become e-learners. So basically, the bulk of the students within the higher education sector are well covered. Yes, the institutions themselves have challenges with bandwidth. Also, to some extent, in some of the institutions, very few, the challenge of capacity. But as I said, the ministry, our public and private higher education institutions, our partners, we are working together to ensure that we address this need. As I speak, consultations are at an advanced stage to see how best the 25% negatively affected students could be assisted. You spoke about NSFAF. NSFAF does fund 100% of students' tuition fees, those who are funded by NSFAF. We also know that there are students who are privately funded. Within the NASFAF components of fees, there is what we call tuition fee, which I said is 100% paid, covered by NASFAF. But also there is an amount called non-tuition fee. It is for the students themselves, those who are funded by NASFAF, to see to it that when this money comes, the non-tuition fee part comes, it is directed to a worthy cause. And what is that worthy cause in these challenging times? Acquisition of the necessary electronic gadgets that will ensure that they will continue to access education online.
Thank you, Doctor. Perhaps we could also get into final words as we respond to the questions.
Welcome back. Thank you for tuning in. This afternoon, we were at the community center, COVID Community Center at the Commerce Regional Council with the panel on higher education, discussed the issues around e-learning. And this session also saw the launch of the high-level inter-universities research task force on COVID-19 and engagement on e-learning. This group will be tackling a number of issues pertaining to e-learning and education. Thank you for tuning in.